Hello, and welcome to this knitting basics video. Now, if you're new to knitting and you want to learn, this is a great place to start. Or, if it's been a while since you've picked up some yarn and needles and you just want a bit of a refresh, again, I'm so glad you're here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through on how to cast on to your needle. Then we're going to go over the knit stitch, the purl stitch, how to bind off, and to weave in your ends at the end. So grab your yarn, grab your needles, come on back, and we'll get started. Okay, so to get started, we are going to cast on our stitches to one of our needles. So to get started on that, we're going to create our loop. So take your yarn and crisscross it like so. Then take the tail and bring it through to the back so that it's in the middle of that loop. Then while holding the yarn and the loop with your right hand, take that middle piece of yarn and pull it up and through that loop to create your knot. Then just simply put that loop onto a knitting needle, pull this tight, and you're ready to get started. So we're going to cast on your stitches. Now, if you look at your pattern, actually, you know what? Don't even worry about a pattern right now. The main goal is to practice this process of casting on. But when you're looking at a pattern, sometimes you need to cast on 100 stitches, sometimes you need to cast on 20, but it's the same process. Casting on is the same process regardless of what pattern you're working on. And I look at this, I look at these stitches as your foundation row, because when you're doing your row, like when you're starting row 1, you're knitting from this foundation row, okay? So this is the first step to starting any knitting project. So to cast on, you're going to take your right needle and you're going to insert it through your loop, and you're going to go to the back. So you're going to go to the back of that left needle, okay? Then grab your yarn, not your tail. You're going to grab your yarn and you're going to yarn over until that yarn sits at that loop. Then slowly pull back that right needle and bring it through the loop so that stitch ends up on your right needle. Then you're going to pull your right needle up and toss that stitch onto your left needle and then pull it tight from there. So we've got 2 stitches now on our needle. So let's do this a few more times. And again, don't be afraid to just sit and practice this one step until it feels comfortable under your fingers. So take your right needle, insert it through the top loop from front to back, grab your yarn, yarn over like so. Then take your right needle and pull it back slowly through the loop, so then that stitch ends up on the right. Pull up from there and bring it back onto your left needle and pull tight. So now we have 3. So again, take your right needle, go through the top loop from front to back, yarn over, then bring your right needle down, pull it through that loop, pull the loop up, and put it back onto your left needle from there. So we've got 4 stitches sitting on our left needle. Now the left needle is the holder of the stitches, and when you start your rows, you're transferring the stitches from your left to your right while adding a row. That's basically how a knitting project starts to form and to take shape. So let's do this one more time. Take your right needle, insert it through the loop from front to back, yarn over, pull the right needle back through the loop, keep pulling through, and put that stitch onto your left needle from there. So I'm going to do about 15 stitches. I'm going to cast on 15 stitches, so I'm going to continue doing those. And when you're finished that, come on back and we will start row 1 where we learn the knit stitch. So the knit stitch is very, very similar to the casting on method, except we're going to transfer that stitch to the right hand needle instead of creating the loop as if we were casting on. So you're going to want to push your stitches up close to the top of that left needle. The thing I want you to be very careful of though is when you're doing the first stitch or two, when you're transferring over a knit stitch or a purl stitch, be careful that it doesn't get too close to the top, because sometimes the stitches will just slip off and you don't even notice it. So just make sure that while your stitches are close to the top, they're not really close to that top, so that while you're working on your stitch, the second one doesn't just go flying off. That has happened so many times. So we're going to start the knit stitch. So just like casting on, you're going to take your needle, your right needle, and you're going to push it through the loop to the back, and you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to pull back that right needle and create that loop, and then you're just going to take that stitch off the left needle and transfer it to the right. So you can't see it, but there's a stitch sitting there, and that's your knit stitch. So we're going to do that for the next stitch. We're going to insert your needle through the loop to the back, yarn over, pull that right needle back through the loop, so you've got it sitting on your right needle, and then just push off that stitch, and you've got 2 stitches now. Let's go to stitch number 3. Insert your needle through that loop to the back, yarn over, pull it through to the middle, and you've got the 3rd stitch there, and just lift that off. So right now we're knitting. You've got 3 knit stitches. Again, you can't really see them yet. You're transferring your stitches, you're making your row, your knit row, and you're transferring everything from the left to the right while creating that row. So we're going to insert our needle through the loop to the back, and you're going to yarn over, push the right needle back through that loop, and take your stitch off. So again, practice, practice, practice. Practice this until it feels comfortable in your hands. Don't be afraid to make a small swatch and just do this knit row over and over and over again. The knit row, the knit stitch, and the purl stitch are the 2 main stitches in a knitting pattern. And a lot of the stitches, like a lot of the fancier stitches, use the knit or the purl or a combination of both to create those stitches. So these are the 2 stitches you need to have in your knitting toolkit, so to speak, okay? So we're gonna insert our hook, insert our needle, doing some crochet speak here. We're gonna insert your needle through the loop to the back, yarn over, pull through, and just flick that stitch onto the right side. So now you can start to see your knit row, your knitting stitches. They're starting to form from this foundation row. So I'm going to finish the rest of the stitches, and then we're going to come back and we're going to go over the purl stitch. Okay, so look at that. There's your first row of knit stitches. Again, once you do more rows, you'll start to see your pattern take shape. It's usually in the third or fourth row that I think you can start seeing your pattern come through. But you've got one row of knit stitches, so good work. Okay, so we're going to do the purl stitch. Now the purl stitch is similar, but you're going through the front instead. So to do that purl stitch, you're going to take your right needle and you're going to insert it from the top right, insert it through that first loop to the front instead. So we're not going in the back, we're going through the front. And then you're going to yarn over the front and pull that right needle through the loop like we did with the knit stitch, and then take that stitch off. So you just did your first purl stitch. And again, we're transferring our stitches from the left to the right. So let's do this a few more times. So you're going to insert your hook. Sorry, gosh, I can't stop saying hook. Insert your needle from the top right side through that loop to the front. Then take your yarn over and push your right needle through so that the loop shows up on that right side, and then you're going to flick that off. So now you have 2 purl stitches on your right needle. So let's do this a couple more times. We're going to go through the front, yarn over, pull your needle back so the loop shows up on the right, and just toss that off. Again, this is something that if you just need to sit and do a bunch of purl stitching, then do it until it feels comfortable under your hands. So again, we're going to go through top right, go through that loop to the front, yarn over, pull that needle back, and then flick it off. And this is your purl row starting to take shape. Now the purl row is considered the wrong side of your knitting project. The knit stitch is considered the right side. So as you progress, you'll be able to tell which is the front side, which is the back side, which comes in handy when you're working on a pattern, and if it's just continuous, like a stockinette stitch where you're doing a knit row, a purl row, a knit row, a purl row. When you can see, you know, that you're working on the wrong side versus the right side, it helps you to keep track of which row you're working on. Very, very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to finish off this row, and again, pause the video and practice this as much as necessary with both the knit stitch and the purl stitch so that it feels comfortable. Okay, so I went ahead and I did a couple of extra rows because I wanted to show you what that stockinette stitch looks like, the one that I mentioned briefly before. So a stockinette stitch is a knit row, purl row, knit row, purl row, and so on and so forth. And this is the right side of your project. So if you're knitting, this is what you would be looking at. If you're doing a purl row, then this is what you would be looking at. And again, this comes in handy if you're working in that stockinette stitch for multiple rows and you're in front of the TV and you're not closely paying attention, then you can see which row you should be working on based on the right side or that wrong side. So to bind off, it's very important to pay attention to your pattern. It will say bind off in knit or bind off in purl. and that's based on the last row of your pattern. So I just did a purl row, so I will be binding off in knit. Now, binding off in knit or purl, it's the same process, it just depends on how you're binding off. So if you're binding off in knit, you will be doing knit stitches. If you're binding off in purl, you'll just be doing purl stitches instead. But both, it's the same for both, okay, the process. So we're going to bind off in knit. To get started, you're going to do 1 knit stitch. So we're just going to do our knitting stitch for the first stitch. Then you're going to knit the second stitch. So you should have 2 stitches on your right needle. Now to bind off, you're going to take your left needle and you're going to insert it through the first stitch, not the second stitch, but the first stitch. You're going to take that stitch and you're going to pull it up and over the second stitch and toss it off from there, making sure that that second stitch stays on your right needle. So let's do this a few more times. We're going to knit another stitch onto your right needle. So you should have 2 stitches there. Take your left needle, put it under that first stitch, and take it up and over that second stitch and toss it off from there. Let's do that again. We're going to do another knit stitch. So you should have 2 stitches on that right needle. Take your left needle, put it under that first stitch, and pull it up and over that second stitch. And you will do this for every stitch that's remaining in your project. Go under that first stitch, first loop, and then pull it up and over. And you can start to see your binding stitches take shape from there. Okay, so again, pause this and do this as many times as you feel necessary until it feels comfortable from there. So you'll always want to make sure you've got 2 stitches on your right needle. Insert your left needle through that first stitch and pull it up and over that second stitch. And take your time with this process as well. Don't be afraid to take your time with this. Sometimes as you're pulling off those stitches, the second one will want to join in with that, and you don't want that. But yes, take your time with this step. I'm going to continue through to the rest until I have 1 stitch remaining, and then I will show you how to fasten off and weave from there. Okay, so we are finished with binding off. Look at that really nice row that you just made. And we have 1 stitch remaining on that needle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a bit of a loop there and take my needle out. And I'm going to create a bit of a longer tail. And I'm just going to cut that off from there. The first step is I'm going to create a knot. So just like that starting loop, I'm going to bring the tail across the back of that finishing loop, and I'm just going to pull that through to create that knot. Then I'm going to take my tapestry needle and thread my tail. Now for knitting, because I'm going to be in the back here, for weaving off, there's a lot of different methods that you can use to weave in your end. You can go through each stitch and pull it through in one solid motion. The only thing is I find that your tail will show up on the front of your project. So while it's a great method, I would probably use that method more for a crochet project, not necessarily a knitting project. So that when I'm working on a knitting project, I like to go up and down through these purled stitches. And so you're basically sewing when you're weaving off. So I'm going to go up and down through these stitches like so. So you can see the different stitches here. You're simply just going to go up and down through there. And I'm probably going to go right to the end. This is a very important step when you're finishing your project because you want to make sure that your stitches don't come out and that your tail doesn't come out, whether you're working on a sweater or a washcloth or anything that, especially something that needs to be washed. You want to make sure that this woven piece doesn't come loose. So I just went up and down all the way across, and I'm going to come back through again. And when you flip over your project, you can't see any of those stitches. It's all being held in the back, which is why I like to weave off in this manner in a knitting project, as opposed to going just straight through and pulling it through and then going back and forth. It's a great method, but I feel like if you're not careful, it'll show up, you know, on the front of your work, and you don't necessarily want that. So I'm just going to simply go up and down and up and down until I'm back through. So when you're finished, you know, kind of pull your project a little bit like so. And then you're simply just going to snip off your tail and you're finished. And you'll want to do the same thing for any of the tails that you have in your project. And you're done. Now, if you have any questions at all about any part of this process, please just let me know. I'm here to help. If you need extra help, if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm more than happy to help in that way. As I said, just keep practicing. These are the basics. You want to get them down first before you start on any project. I know you want to just get started. You want to make that sweater. You want to make that scarf. But trust me when I say when you've got the basics down, then you can make anything from there. So again, please reach out if you have any questions or you need help. And thank you so much for watching.